I'm Chance Dorland, and this is the Spurs Insider, our new weekly NBA podcast from expressnews.com, brought to you each week by the law offices of Thomas J. Henry. As is the plan for every episode, I'm joined now by San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young. Great to have you back, Jabari.
Always a pleasure to be with you, man. Always.
Always a pleasure, even if the content of what we discuss is not so easy to talk about. I do a lot of podcasts for Express News, and on Monday's edition of the Express Briefing, our daily news digest, I reported the Spurs' 9th loss in the past 12 games has put them in a free fall, places them in jeopardy of missing the postseason for the first time since the 96-97 season. And if they lose to Houston on Monday, we're recording today's episode in the AM of Monday, so we don't know yet, they're likely to return to San Antonio out of the playoff picture altogether. But before the most recent loss to Oklahoma, the Spurs had that very disappointing 3-point defeat from Golden State, 110-107. And that's what we're starting off today's podcast with, right, Jabari?
Yeah, man. You know, I go back to that loss. That was a disappointing one, you know, and it should have been. Greg Popovich was not happy after the game. And usually after those type games, you know, even if they lose to Steve Kerr, you know, his protege, and to the Golden State Warriors, and we know they're a powerful team. We know they're very talented. We know they're deep. We know they got 4 all-stars in Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Steph Curry. But you had that team. You're up 8 with 4:44 to go in their building. You got to close the game. No Steph Curry because he got injured his ankle, so he didn't play the rest of the game after that first quarter injury. And you get outscored 17-6 in the last 4:40. That can't happen. You got to win that game. You have to find some way, somehow, to dig deep to win that game. That was a disappointing loss because you had him. Now, you know, obviously Kevin Durant's a great player, so he's going to do what he does. But at the same time, you have to execute too. And the Spurs just failed. They failed to execute down the stretch. Once again, fourth quarter problems came to rise, and Greg Popovich used a term called corporate knowledge, and how it's a lack of it going on in the fourth quarter where guys don't know what to do. They don't know the plays. It was disappointing in that aspect. You got to do a better job at that. You have to. And if you do that, you set that road trip off with a spark. You get confidence. You have momentum now. Okay, now you're riding a 2-game winning streak because you just beat Memphis, and now you're able to come into Golden State and beat those guys. And so it was just a disappointing loss for that team, especially the Spurs need wins, and you had to have that win. And I know people are going to look at Greg Popovich and say, well, he kind of blew it at the end. And maybe so, because the personnel on the floor was not ideal to that circumstance because they were young and you know, they were inexperienced. But on the other hand, you got to say, you know what? Greg Popovich is also putting guys in the proper position so that way they can learn. Brent Forbes, wide open 3 to tie the game at the end there. 9 times out of 10, he makes that. You know, LaMarcus Aldridge obviously getting a double team, guys just not stepping up and helping him out and late in the game there. And they're going to get put in position so that way they can gain that experience. But on the other hand, again, Spurs need wins. And that was one that they dropped that was very tough because, again, we're taping this on Monday. When they play the Houston Rockets, it's very likely that they come back to San Antonio on Tuesday on a 3-game losing streak, having got swept. And that's just not right. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not right because it ain't wrong, but it's just they need to make sure that this is corrected and they need to get it together and fast, because if they do not, they'll find themselves on the outside looking in once April starts and once the playoffs start. And that's not a position the Spurs want to be in.
Now, Jabari, aside from the fact that outscored at the end, as you just talked about, you know, they lost by 3, heartbreak, you know, finale there. To go back to what we talked about last episode. So last week, you know, if they're going to play Golden State, make it a close game. They didn't get blown out. So maybe if this had been 110-107 and they had been behind in the fourth and they just caught up, but they couldn't finish the race, if you will. Is this still good for them? Because they weren't blown out.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, I love the execution, and that's the positive. You know, I know people don't want to look at moral victories, but that's the positive of it. And I said this on our post-game wrap. listen, the corporate knowledge there at the end showed. I mean, that's just guys gaining experience in close games, especially against a superior team like the Golden State Warriors, who they're going to start making shots. Kevin Durant's going to say, you know what, enough's enough. I had it. Let me take this game over. And great players do that. Great players make shots, and he did what he had to do. But you also have a good player on the other end in LaMarcus Aldridge, who, obviously they're going to send double, and they did that. They made things very tough for him. But you got to find ways to make plays. You got to find ways, okay, if y'all want to double our guy, we're going to hit shots and alleviate that. So listen, from quarters 1 all the way up until 4, with 4 minutes left, the Spurs did everything they were supposed to do. Okay, they didn't panic when Golden State made runs. They hit shots. They executed. They played good defense. They finished possession. Okay, and they did everything the right way from 1 through 4. But you have to play 48 minutes of basketball, and that was the disappointing part on their end. They did not play 48 minutes of basketball, because if they play 48 minutes of basketball from start to finish, 9 times out of 10 they win that game.
If there hadn't been an injury on the Warriors side, would this have even been this close? What do you think that game would have looked like?
It would have been, yeah, with Steph Curry in the lineup, it probably would have been tough, okay? But at the same time, like I said, if you execute and you play 48 minutes of basketball, because at that point, their defense was pretty solid. I mean, listen, they did a lot of things good in that game. And even with Steph Curry there, he would have made some big shots, don't doubt. But at the same time, if the Spurs would have continued to execute like they did from quarters 1 through 4, all the way to 4 minutes left, I think that there's a good chance that they still were able to walk away with that victory. Now, without Steph Curry, it makes things a little easier for them. But at the same time, it doesn't matter who's on the court. You have to hit shots. Now, remember something. A lot of it had to do also that the Warriors were missing Andre Iguodala. They were missing, David West, one of their best coming off the bench. Jordan Bell didn't play. Patrick McCall didn't play. So, they were missing some key players, but nobody's feeling sorry for the Warriors, because ain't nobody feels sorry for the Spurs. You just play who you got to play. And at that point, like I said before, when you're up 8 without Steph Curry, you just got to win that game. Some way, somehow, you got to win that game. And the Spurs didn't do it.
Yeah, missed opportunity. That would be the time to do it. You're right. And they didn't do it.
Yeah,
they didn't play 4 quarters.
Yeah.
So, Spurs, interesting times. But to go back to talk about missing a player, the return of Kawhi Leonard, that's the ongoing topic that we've been discussing every week. Where are we at now? What does it all mean this week?
Well, I mean, it's the likelihood of him returning this week is very high. As we talked about it on this very podcast, I reported it, that this, the beginning of March is when he was going to do it.
Yeah, if someone had taken a big marker in a calendar weeks ago and listened to you, we'd be right about that big X time.
Yeah, this is right around this second week. And if you really want to look at it, this is the full second week of March right now. And I said this is the time, because they need the rest of this month, and they need the beginning part of April to really get into a rhythm with him on the court. But the likelihood of him returning, is very high if he has no setbacks. So it's going to help. Now, people have to realize something. Kawhi Leonard's not going to step back on the court and all is going to be right with the world. You know what I mean? The Spurs are going to start dominating and blowing people out. His presence on the court is going to help. Him being on the court is going to help. Once he gets his legs under him, once he knocks off a little rust, he should start to develop. He should start to hit some shots. He should start looking like his old self. And it's going to help. And they just got to hope that. But just because it's going to help this team doesn't mean that everybody else is going to fold. You know what I mean? You can't tell. Denver's just not going away. Okay, hey, the Clippers are not just going away. New Orleans, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, they're not just going to go away. Oh man, Kawhi Leonard's back. Let's stop playing bad. No, they still are going to play. And if they continue to win games, even if you're winning, remember, you've already put yourself in a hole. So you have to hope that you can beat your opponent.
This goes back to what I think you mentioned last week, is that not only are you losing, but other teams are winning. So they have to dig out of everything they've put themselves into.
Exactly. You have to win and hope that they lose. You know what I mean? So it's not as easy as just Kawhi Leonard coming back and you guys make it, and the Spurs making a championship run. But again, his presence on the court is going to help. His presence in that late game, is going to help. Teams can't double on LaMarcus Aldridge. You got one of your best 3-point shooters back, so hopefully that end of that particular area of the offense will start to improve a little bit. So if he can get back into rhythm sooner rather than later when he steps back on the court, it should only help the Spurs. Now, again, they have to take care of business on their home court for the rest of the season. They have a lot of home games from here on out, and they got to do their job. They can't let inferior teams come into their building and take them to the limit. They can't let teams that they're supposed to beat them. They got to win. They have to win, and they got to win fast because they're in a dangerous position right now. They're already 7th, and as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, they lose to Houston on Monday night. When we're taping this podcast, they fall to 10th. That's not an ideal place. Kawhi Leonard is going to help, but believe me, trust me, all the pressure can't be on him. Other guys have to continue to play and play well, and with him in the lineup, everything should get a little bit easier.
Yeah, you mentioned this last week, and also you mentioned it in a great video you did that I checked out on expressnews.com. This whole Michael Jordan thing, when he came back, not even the great Michael Jordan, which obviously for many people, the greatest player who ever lived, although, a lot of King James fans out there nowadays. So I guess that's an argument to be had. But, Kawhi Leonard comes back. If they were doing really well right now, who's to say what would happen? But he's not coming back with the best of circumstances underneath the team.
That's exactly. And remember, he's not going to be 100%. Okay. Maybe he's 80, 90%. He's not going to be 100% healthy. And even if he is, like I said, he still has to knock off rust, and that's going to take time. Continuity takes time to build. That's why it's 82 games in the season, Chance, because teams need all that time to build chemistry, to build continuity, to build, to eliminate habits, to go through their win streaks, to go through their losing streaks. They need to find out who's who. So that way, once the playoff rolls, it's 0-0, and they got to put their best stuff out there. And like I said, Kawhi is going to need the rest of this month. He's going to need to begin part of April, and the Spurs hope that he can be in some good form by the time the playoffs roll around.
Now, obviously, we've been talking about Kawhi Leonard's, impending return, at least what we were hoping to be the impending return for quite some time now. But this name that keeps popping up quite a different times here already in the podcast today, LaMarcus Aldridge, a lot of pressure still on him. He's very key for the Spurs right now.
Something, man, and everybody points to Kawhi as being the savior. And I say to myself, no, his presence, again, is going to help, but this all still falls on LaMarcus Aldridge. If Kawhi comes back, great. LaMarcus got to say, come on, Kawhi. You got to get on my back, man. The team's on my back. You got to get on my back, and we got to go. And once we feel comfortable enough that you're in that position, that his legs are under him, that he knocked off the rust, everything's good. We're solid. But it's still going to fall on LaMarcus to make sure that he performs. Kawhi Leonard can't come back and all of a sudden he just disappear. Kawhi Leonard can't come back and all of a sudden LaMarcus Aldridge goes into a funk and he's averaging less and he's not scoring the ball like he knows how and he's not playing with he knows how. He is still needed very, very much. If they don't get the LaMarcus Aldridge that they've had all season long, if they don't get that LaMarcus Aldridge that made him another All-Star game, if they don't get that LaMarcus Aldridge who's been averaging the points and rebounds that he's been putting up since his days in Portland, if they don't get that version of LaMarcus Aldridge, then it does not matter that Kawhi Leonard steps back on the court because they need each other. Kawhi needs to play well. LaMarcus needs to play well if they plan on competing in the West. LaMarcus still has to have this team on his back, and he has to finish the job. He's held them down for the most part. He's done his part. They were 3 seed, and for most of the season, and obviously they fell a little bit. But you have to do your part, dude. You are a great player yourself. You can't fold. You run from the moment now. You got to step up. The pressure's still on him because he's still the leader. He's still one of the leaders of his team, and he still has his rhythm. He has his rhythm. I know he's going through a right knee issue, some of the pain there, but guess what? Everybody's suffering. Everybody's hurting, okay? And at this point of the season, we got a whole bunch of bumps and bruises. You got to get it together. You got to go. Because right now, let me tell you something. The optics doesn't look well. You know why? Because LaMarcus left the team in Portland to come to San Antonio to win. That team in Portland right now is sitting third in the Western Conference, and they are balling. And God forbid, the Spurs get to the 6th seed and Portland's in the 3rd, and they got to face each other in the first round. The story, the headlines just write themselves. LaMarcus got to go to Portland, and he has to get past the Trailblazers. The Spurs got to get past the Trailblazers in order for him to advance to the playoffs in the second round. I mean, it just writes itself. So LaMarcus got to finish the job. The pressure's still going to be on him, and you hope that a great player performs great and does what he has to do down the stretch because, like I said before, the Spurs are going to need him. They're going to need him.
And then, Jabari, before we move on to our final topic, which reminds me of something that we talked about a few episodes back, I'll rehash that in a moment. Final thoughts, any predictions for the next few games for this, this perhaps impending return of Kawhi? What are your thoughts for the next week or so?
Well, they're not playing well offensively, and that's been something that they've been, staggering at. They may lose to Houston. People hear this podcast on, is up on Tuesday. They got the Orlando Magic, a young, hungry team that has nothing at all to lose. And so with that said, right, they have to make sure that the Orlando Magic don't come in here and does not give them something that they got to be, that they got to think about. Orlando beat them, at the beginning of the season. Orlando's young, they're hungry. They're still a team that's, learning things. But remember something, they also have a guy, Jonathan Simmons, who would love nothing more than to come into the building that he once played in and prove to the Spurs why he deserves the money that he's getting right now that they refuse to pay him. And so he wants to light them up. That's just the competitor in him. He wants to beat them. And so he has a team now that says, we're going to go out and get this one for you. They got to be careful because at the end of the day, they can be losing 4 straight games. Now, with that said, again, they have a lot of games in March on their home floor. But for the most part, they've been pretty well this season playing at home. They just got to take care of business. I don't care who the opponent is. Golden State Warriors, Oklahoma City Thunder, you got to take care of business. This is your home floor now. This is good. You got to protect it. You got to protect your home court. The same way teams who have beat you in their home building, you got to come and you got to beat them on your home floor. And that's it. That's it. If you can take care of business on your home floor, from there on out, you'll make the playoffs. You'll be in a good position going into the playoffs. If you can't, you're in dangerous territory. You're walking on a slippery slope, and you can put yourself in danger of missing the playoffs for the first time since 96, 97. And again, people in San Antonio, they don't know what that tastes like. Other teams, other cities around the NBA, they know exactly what it tastes like. The Spurs, they haven't tasted that in 20 years. So there's going to be some panic. But if they can take care of business on their home court, like I said, they're in a good position. And so the prediction is, you win at home, you make it to the playoffs. You lose at home, where 1 or 2 games can mean that you're out. You're putting yourself in a bad position. I believe the Spurs will take care of business at home. I believe we'll be doing some special podcasts soon, talking about the playoff opponent that they got to face. We'll see if that happens.
All right. Well, there's a prediction. We'll see if that happens, as you've so put it. Now, to get back to what I was mentioning just a second ago, I forget the team. You're going to remember immediately, but there was a game some weeks ago where the Spurs played an opponent that had a flight problem and they got like no sleep whatsoever. I bring that up because there's an article in the San Antonio Sports Nation, the magazine, that talks about sleep concerning the San Antonio Spurs. But of course, this, would be for any NBA team. So refresh my memory, Jabari. Which team am I talking about?
I forget the team I said, but I believe it was New Orleans. I believe it was New Orleans because they had some flight issues that they had to overcome. And they came in and they overcame a deficit and they still won. So, but yeah, it was an article that I wrote on sleep, and it's been an issue. It's been a topic that's been studied around the league for quite some time now. And there's never going to be a way to do it. There's never going to be one way to do it, but it's just an ongoing study on how players can better maximize their sleeping time so that way they can better maximize their performance as well as their recovery. And so you got guys that's getting into hotel rooms at 2, 3 in the morning sometimes when they're traveling from one city to another. There are guys who, when they get there, sometimes they can sleep, sometimes they can't. What do they do to fall asleep? How can they get to sleep? What are some of the techniques that they got to use? And that includes putting down a cell phone. That blue light that science teaches us when you're on your cell phone late at night and you're supposed to be asleep, that's going to keep you up and that's going to block you from getting to sleep. And it's also going to block you from staying asleep if you're on it in the middle of the night and you wake up and you look at the phone, that's taken away from it. So I think it was a very good article to talk to, a very good article for me to talk to some guys to figure out what techniques, what ways that they fell asleep and how they do it. Rudy Gay, he uses a white noise machine when he gets in the hotel rooms. I didn't even know that each hotel offers white noise machines, and he also offers humidifiers if you want one. So the white noise machine blocks out noise and allows you to hear a certain sound so you can stay asleep. So this was really interesting. It really was. And I encourage people to go read that article, not just because I wrote it, because I think we all have sleep issues, not just athletes. And I think some of the things that they do in there, some of the advice that guys like Greg Popovich gives young players, I think will help a lot of people with sleep issues. And that includes myself, because I can't get to sleep sometime. And Chance, I know you can't.
Oh, heck yeah. So what I often do will just be like, there's so many different apps, so I don't even remember which ones they are, but whether or not it's an iPhone or you got an Android phone, there's always free apps that will have like the sound of water in like a creek or like rain or like a thunderstorm or something like that. Now, it's probably not great to fall asleep with earbuds all the time, but you could obviously plug that into a speaker or something. But yeah, that's just really calming and soothing, and I think that could probably help anybody. I got a question though, Jabari, since you kind of did some research on this. Does this discussion of sleep ever enter into the team talking to players specifically, or is there general guidelines they give them, or are these just players kind of, trading around their secrets that they use when they're on the road?
Well, there's no guidelines. There's no guidelines. These are grown men, and obviously teams have to respect their private space. Players are going to do what they need to do as long as they perform on the court, as long as they keep their body right, keep their diet right, exercise, make sure that they get the proper training in. Some players can't sleep. Some players, this is not their thing. But if you're going on the court and you're scoring 50 points for a team, they're going to tell you, hey, you know what? Don't sleep anymore. We're fine. So I think it's just that teams do keep, and they do voluntarily tell players that if they want to learn more, teams have brought in specialists. They brought in people to talk to players about how to maximize sleep, how to fall asleep, how to fall asleep with the light on, what not to do, what to do. To stay asleep. So they do that. They provide data for the players on how they sleep. And if they choose, they can get that data collected. Now, it's all voluntarily. It's not, teams can't force players to do that, because then you're dealing with an ethics issue, and then the Players Association get involved. So they don't want that. But they do provide a lot of data. They do provide a lot of techniques. Now, teams also will do things differently than other teams. For instance, the Boston Celtics, they do shoot-arounds. Shoot-arounds, for instance, they usually are held on the road, and are usually held in the morning time around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning. Players then go home, and then they, rest or go back to the hotel, and then they rest, and then they got to get back up, travel back to the game. What the Boston Celtics do, they say, hey, you know what? You guys just stay asleep in the morning. Use that morning and use that early part of the day to get rest. And then they do their shoot-arounds at the arena. Okay, they do their shoot-arounds at the arena before the game. So it's 2 hours before the game, they'll do their shoot-around. Then they'll do their pregame routine. So that way, when a player gets up in the morning, they get up and they stay and they rest. But when they get up to go to the arena, they're there for the majority of the time now. So there's no getting up, going to shoot-around, going home, trying to get 2 hours of rest, then getting back up, and then going back to the game and doing all that traveling, interfering in your rest, interfering in your sleep. And so the Spurs are one of the teams that's attempting to do that more. They tried to do it on the road a few times. They couldn't do it because teams have utilized their own home court to do it. And more teams, I think you're going to start to see that happen. Also, what teams do is on certain games, they don't travel after a game. Like for a West Coast game, after that loss to the Denver Nuggets, the Spurs came and they arrived at in Denver, and then after the game was over, they went home, or they went back to the hotel instead of traveling to Cleveland. And so that way, it puts rest on it allows your body to rest instead of having to travel. You know what I mean? So if the Spurs were to leave Denver right after a game, hop on a plane, get to Cleveland, you're throwing your body up. So instead, you go back to the hotel, you get a good night's rest, and then you travel mid-morning after a team breakfast, camaraderie also. So, like I said, it's just a very interesting topic. It was a very interesting to talk to players about it. And they opened up, and, like I said, it's an ongoing issue. It's nothing that's finalized. It's nothing. There's no technique that they say, hey, do it this way, you're guaranteed to have results. No, it's a trial and error type deal. Because, like I said, we all have problems getting sleep. We all have problems getting rest. I took a yoga class for the first time over the weekend, Chance. Let me tell you something. Even doing yoga, even relaxing your body in a quiet room, let me tell you something. That helps. No TV, no phone, no nothing. It helps. And let me tell you, some of those positions, I was asleep already. And I was saying to myself, man, at nighttime, man, I know what to do. I got to sit up here and it got to be a black room. It has to be a dark room in order to let your body rest. And man, when your body rests, when you get the proper amount of rest, your mood is different. You feel better. You feel more energy. You got that that feeling of just well-being. And so I think, we drink caffeine, we drink 5-hour energy, we drink Red Bulls and coffee. We're doing everything to stay awoke, to stay awake, to don't fall asleep. And at the end of the day, that's all we really need is a lot of sleep in order for us to feel good. And so I think, like I said, it's just interesting. It was interesting to do, and I hope it came across as interesting to read.
Anything to help the Spurs at this point. Check it out. SA Sports Nation, the magazine, a little bit about sleep. Talking about the Spurs specifically, but yeah, any team and anyone else. Final thoughts, the eye cover. You see it sometimes on airplanes. I love the eye cover. I sleep with the eye cover at home. It's a brilliant small device. Get a nice fluffy one that feels good on the skin. That's your little advice from Chance today on the show. So, Jabari Young,
I didn't even know that.
Spurs beat reporter, check it out, man. You'll sleep like a baby. So, once again, Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young joining me here for this edition of the Spurs Insider. Best of luck to the Spurs with today's game and everything else coming up this week. And Jabari, I'll talk to you next week about hopefully some good news.
Absolutely, man. Hopefully so, man. Good week. Kawhi Leonard may come back and they start winning some games, and I think there'll be more interest. People will be wanting to hear it out because people hate when the Spurs lose. They don't want nothing to do with nothing. They don't want to read. They don't want to listen. They don't want to look. They put themselves in a state of misery because they're not used to it. So hopefully some good news in the next week.
Yeah, 96-97 the last time, so definitely not used to it. All right, thanks, Jabari. Talk to you next week, man.
All right. See you, Chance.
And thanks again to San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young for joining me for today's episode of the Spurs Insider, our new weekly NBA podcast from expressnews.com, brought to you today by the law offices of Thomas J. Henry. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.